My name's Roger. I am a PhD student at King's College. As some of you no doubt know by now, I've spent the last 4 years doing field research in how to cause trouble effectively in London. There's a sort of academic title to my PhD, but I always keep changing it, but it's basically how to create effective radical mobilisation. I'm doing these 2 sessions as a sort of stab at trying to popularise the research that I've done. And I've got a rather big claim that the research that I've done is some of the most important research in the world. But lots of people don't believe that, but there we go, that's my claim. And hopefully I'll persuade some of you that it's really important. In case you think I'm really big-headed, my disclaimer is that most of the information I'm giving you has sort of been discovered by other people, so I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, as it were. But those giants have mainly been forgotten. So our modern society is gradually rediscovering the joys of political struggle. And I'm going to sort of outline, particularly in this session, more stuff about large-scale mobilisation. So I sort of split it into 2, because last time we were looking at like the micro level, like individual level a little bit. And now we're going to look at the macro level, a large-scale level. It's not quite like that, but it sounds good, doesn't it? So I'm going to keep it like that. So my research has been a bit unusual in so much as, well, for a start, people that do PhDs don't tend to get arrested 10 times in a year. So that's all part of the job. And I've been on 2 hunger strikes and been in prison and various sort of dramatic things, which I'll talk about as part of these campaigns. And just to make clear, I haven't gone to all that trouble just to do a PhD. I do actually happen to believe in these campaigns. But some people seem to have this rather weird idea that I'd choose to go to all that trouble for scientific advance, but not really. Anyway, so these are some of the campaigns. I think that's all of them. I've had, this is a little bit constructed because when you're doing research, you tend to go out and make loads of mistakes and people don't like something comes to nothing, and then when you write your PhD you sort of make it look like everything was nice and smooth and easy. But so I've sort of censored out the ones that went a bit pear-shaped. But the main campaigns that I was involved in no particular order, is King's College Climate Emergency, which some of you may have heard of, which is a divestment campaign to get this college to divest from fossil fuels. The LSE Occupation, which is mainly about education and economics and inequality, that happened about 3 years ago now. The Graduate Teaching Assistants campaign, again at this college, trying to get PhD students to get paid more than £2 an hour, which seems reasonable. And the IWGB, which is, I think it's Independent Workers of Great Britain. I think I got that wrong last time. But anyway, that's the correct. So I worked with them for a year. They're a small grassroots union. They did campaigns for casualised workers, immigrant workers in London, like increasing their pay and what have you. So that was quite interesting, and I helped initiate the Deliveroo campaign, which maybe some of you have heard of. And then there's Cut the Rent campaign, which was the first rent strike in London for 30, 40 years. I helped to design that, and it won, so that was good. And then since then, my supervisors told me I had to stop, but I was sort of in a bit of a rhythm by then, so I did go off and do 1 or 2 other things. So by that time, there was a whole bunch of people in London who were involved in basically prototyping how to create effective bottom-up radical campaigns. So the next one we did was Stop Killing Londoners, which was about pollution. And then, as you may have heard, there's this little thing called Extinction Rebellion, which seems to have hit the jackpot. So I can say a bit more about that. Okay, I've got, one more thing. I've got 2 books for you to read. I'm not going to, this isn't going to be a big academic, presentation. I'm not going to be zapping you with loads of references and things because I just can't be bothered. So you can read my PhD if you want to read an official version. So I'm going to try, I don't know, I've got to proofread it, and then I'm going to put it up online, and then hopefully someone will proofread it for me. So it can be a group effort, because I'm a bit busy at the moment designing.
Is that still available via the Radical Think Tank website?
Yeah, I might put it on, and we'll talk about that at the end. What's it called? I'm not quite sure yet, but Radical Mobilisation, something like that. So there's 2 books there. We can come on to those at the end. Yeah, I don't know whether this is useful last time, but I did have 1 or 2 concepts which I'll explain in more detail complexity herding, a social political issue, and distribution analysis, which is about how to study groups of people. So I'll refer to those a bit more as I go through. So in case you weren't here last time, I'll just briefly outline what we did last time. So what I've been trying, I come up with this idea, I don't know it's going to be totally successful, but instead of sort of boringly going through all the mundanities of 4 years of research, I've sort of selected 6 ideas. And the last idea isn't really part of my PhD, so just want to sting that on the end. But they're mainly just like provocations where conventional wisdom thinks A and I come to a conclusion B. Do you see what I mean? So it's a bit like this is the crux of how to effectively mobilize people. Do you see what I mean? So it's to get you going. If you want to know sort of background stuff, you can read these 2 books, but they're like key things. And my argument will be if you get like 3 or 4 of these right, then you're on the way to being successful on various levels. So the ones I did last time, just to briefly recap, are truth. That was the first one, wasn't it? So my first proposition was there's this thing called the truth, and in revolutionary times, times when the elites are about to collapse, which I would argue is now, then truth becomes a revolutionary concept because you're stating what everyone knows, but no one wants to talk about, if you see what I mean, such as inequality or ecological destruction. So the proposition there is, in order to create an effective campaign, you have to actually say something that's true, which is, quite anti-postmodernist, if you see what I mean. So there's something out there. So that's like the starting point. And then the next thing I talked about was speech, which is a bit of a sort of one-word summary for the whole notion of how you empower people in small groups. And the proposition there was that by getting people to engage in the act of speech, that people become empowered, as opposed to the notion of giving people information, which is the traditional mechanism, particularly on the progressive Enlightenment left, as you might say, that thinks if you give people the truth, the information, then they'll suddenly rise up. They won't. Okay, you need to enable them to co-create their own reality, as it were, through small groups. So that's why I'm going to have you talk to each other, not least because then I can work out what to say next. But through you talking to each other, you may have noticed last time, you tend to actually get more understanding and arguably agree more with what's being said, even though I haven't said it. Okay, and the last thing was about action. So it's a little bit weird because I'm sort of doing 2 action-orientated sort of sections in this talk. But the action thing was basically making the point that in order to mobilize people, you have to act, and then people get mobilized. As opposed to the conventional wisdom is you spend half a year deciding what you're about and why you're a good idea and getting all your groups sorted out and having lots of conferences, and then you act, right? That's not how it works. You go out, as soon as you've got 2 people, literally 3 people, you go out and act, and then you bring other people come into the sphere of mobilization through the observation of action. And action is really just a proxy really for drama, because everyone likes drama. And obviously, radical mobilisation assumes social conflict. Okay, you're not having a nice chat with someone, you're basically disrupting their interests, and through that, you're making change happen, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about dilemma, or dilemmas, love, and sortition, which is a really mixed bag. So I'm going to talk about dilemma first, and then what we'll do is you can split up again, discuss why what I've said is a bad idea or a good idea, and then we'll have a few questions, and then I'll go on to the next section. And I've got a little rhetorical flourish at the end to look forward to. When I say it's all bollocks, and you should believe something entirely different just to cause a little bit of intellectual animation. Okay, so I like these single word things because they sound a little bit cryptic, don't they? But dilemma basically means something called dilemma action. And it follows on from what we had in the last section, which was this notion of doing action. So as opposed to sitting around and talking, right? So we've established that once you've done action, you sort of animate the social field, as it were. People start talking about it and what have you. But that's really just a really basic point. So my proposition to you is that the fundamental division in social change, radical social change, is between staying within the law and breaking the law. Okay? Staying within the law in a dysfunctional social system means basically conforming to that social system. When you break the law, you basically create a dilemma for the opponent. And the dilemma is this: they've broken the law. Do we let them get away with it, or do we prosecute them? Okay? So that's the nature of the dilemma. And as you can see, if you don't break the law, there isn't a dilemma most of the time, or it's fairly minor. So for instance, just to use a simplified example, for 30 years people have been doing A to B marches, right? An A to B march is not illegal, not in this country anyway. So I'm mainly talking about this country, just for the record. So the proposition is the reason why that isn't effective, and therefore it's not effective at mobilising, is because it doesn't affect the interests of the opponent, whether that's the elites or the rich and powerful or the government. And therefore they don't change. Okay? So with a dilemma action, what you're doing is basically something like sitting in the road, let's say for the sake of argument. Sounds familiar? So you sit in the road, that's like fundamentally different from doing an A to B march, okay? Because the authorities don't have to decide whether to leave you there or drag you off and arrest you. So there's two things here. So there's no action here, and there's repression here, okay? Okay, but there's a third option, which is negotiation. Okay, so the name of the game is to increase the dilemma to the point where the third option is more preferable than the other two. Do you see what I mean? So no action basically means just let them get away with it. But if you increase your illegality, as it were, to a certain point, it'll become intolerable for the authorities to let you get away with it. Do you see what I mean? So it could be here, or it could be up here, right? So then they've got the option of repressing you. So that covers a multitude of sins, but it could mean like arresting you, dragging you off the road, using violence, that sort of thing, okay? Now there's good reasons why they don't want to do that, which I'll come on to in a minute. But at a certain point, if these two pass this point, then they'll decide that they'll negotiate instead. And negotiation is just a proxy basically for winning, right? Because that's where you get your win, because you're actually getting something out of it, okay? So I'm not going to speculate what that win is. So we're just using a sort of binary here that usually in social struggles, it's not exactly like this, but usually you're either going to win or you're not. Do you know what I mean? So in a labour strike, you can see these costs increase, and at some point the bosses will go, okay, the costs to us are so great that we'll negotiate, and that's preferable to letting things carry on the way they are. So in a social conflict situation, it's a little bit different to a labour strike, but the principle is the same, is you increase the costs to the opponent to the extent that they actually want to negotiate with you. So one of the confusions around this is people have this association that this is bad, right? So for the last 30 years, like, people have got the idea that if you're arrested or if violence is acted upon you, then that is bad and it should be avoided. Do you see what I mean? Now, that may be a reasonable emotional response or a moral response, but analytically, which is what we're trying to do this evening, is it's not necessarily, because of something called the backfiring effect. And intelligent elites will not repress, which is why people in the Western world tend to stay in control, rather than in the global South, they tend to be a little less sophisticated. Now, what the backfiring effect does is, if they arrest you, then it creates an emotional response in the cultural group from which you come. to simplify somewhat. So that might mean your friends and your neighbours or your parents or your family or your cultural group go, that's terrible what's happened to Joe. I'm going to go and support him. Do you see what I mean? So they come out from the woodwork, as it were, and they join the confrontation. Now, mathematically speaking, if the police and the authorities take a certain number of people out of the system for arresting them, but a number of other people come in, if the people coming in is greater than the people being pulled out, then that's called backfiring, because you haven't been successful. Now, backfiring doesn't always happen. It's actually quite complicated, which is why I put complexity up there. If you come in early in the struggle and repress people, you can be successful by repression. But at a certain point, then more people will come in. And there's no relationship, interestingly enough, there's no relationship between the degree of repression and the success of repression, contrary to popular opinion. And the reason for that is because people are not primarily motivated by self-interest. They're primarily motivated by emotional connection to the people they're connected to. Do you see what I mean? So, for instance, in Tahrir Square or something like that, the police will come in and they'll do these terrible things. It'll all be on the social media, on telly and what have you, and more people will come into the space. Right? If they were self-interested, they'll be going, oh, I'm not going to do that. But basically, emotional connection trumps self-interest. Arguably, of course, doesn't always, and not for everyone. But the other thing to bear in mind in terms of large confrontations like that is they only tend to involve 1 to 3% of the population. So you can still have 90% of people watching on the telly going, well, that's not for me. All you need is a certain number of people, about 1% of the population, come into this sphere of conflict here. If you see what I mean. Okay, so you might think, well, that's sort of interesting. But this is probably one of the biggest discoveries of the 20th century, because traditionally there's only been one way of dealing with conflict, which is to put up with it, injustice rather, and bad things, injustice, unfairness. There's two ways of dealing with it traditionally. One is you put up with it, and the other is violence. Okay, so for most of human history, those are two main ways of dealing with it. So in the 20th century, we discovered this third way of dealing with it. And the social research says that this is the most successful way of dealing with it. Obviously, doing nothing isn't a great move. Okay, the A to B marches and what have you. And it's been discovered that violence, I'm not going to go on about violence that much, but violence tends to create a reaction from your opponent. So if you want to look at the research, about 54% of non-violent struggles succeed, 25% of violent struggles succeed. So it's a bit of a no-brainer to go for non-violence if you're looking at it rationally. And of the 25% that are violent, 95% end up in a mess, like authoritarian regimes and what have you. So even if you are successful, you're just going to have a load of mess 5 years down the line. The other exciting thing about it, in my humble opinion, is that this mechanism can be triggered with a relatively small amount of people. So one of the big misconceptions about political struggle is you've got to have all these people where you've already established that you don't. You only need 1 to 3% of the population. But what's even more exciting is that you don't actually need to have that many at all. You just need to have enough people to trigger the backfiring effect. Now, often the backfiring effect happens inadvertently. So you get, some peasants have just had enough. They march into the landlord's estate. The landlord brings people out, shoots them, and then all the peasants go, we've had enough of this crap, and they all rebel. Do you see what I mean? So those peasants that went in and sacrificed themselves usually did it because they were just so pissed off. They hadn't really thought about it in an analytical way. So another big discovery of the 20th century with Gandhi and Martin Luther King is that you can proactively create this. Do you see what I mean? So a lot of these campaigns that I was involved in, particularly the more full-on ones, were basically there was a design challenge. And the design challenge is to create a situation where there's this dilemma, and if they go for the repression option, they're going to have a backfiring effect. Do you see what I mean? Now, because social systems are complex, what that means, by the way, is you can't make exact predictions. So you can only do probabilities because it's too complicated. Do you see what I mean? That's all that complexity means. So everything, as I said in the last session, everything I'm going to tell you tonight, it's not like switching on a car engine, right? It's not like switch and then it goes, okay? It's if you do this, you're more likely to succeed relative to doing nothing or conventional campaigning or violence. Do you see what I mean? So that's what I'm trying to sell to you. Do you see what I mean? It's not like, hey, do this and it doesn't work and you can sue me or something, right? It's not gonna. I'm not selling certainty. I'm saying that this is highly probable, and I'm going to go through one or two examples in a minute. So another sort of broader point about dilemma actions and about political drama, and I sort of mentioned this in the last session, is that you have this thing called demonstration effects. So a lot of people, there's two ways you can look upon social struggle. You can look upon it as you've got a reductive analysis, which is you want to get a pay increase for the couriers, right? And you go into the struggle and you do X, Y, and Z, and then you come out with a pay increase and you've won, right? But there's another way of looking upon it, which is you could go into the struggle and it doesn't really work, but it's in all the newspapers around London that the couriers have finally got their act together, and then some sort of Deliveroo worker is going, hey, this is great, I'm going to contact IWGB and go, you know, we want to do that as well. I know it didn't succeed, but it's better than doing nothing. Do you see what I mean? So again, because it's a complex system, you can't really predict this, but you can make the general observation of this thing called demonstration effects. Is once you've created this political drama, other people are going, ooh, you know, I could try that, and why doesn't that work? So, you know, like when I went on hunger strike at King's College, you might say, well, that was great and everything, you know, that's that. But it wasn't, because loads of people around the world or in the UK were going, hang on a minute, you know, we don't want to do petitions to, you know, anymore. Why don't we just not eat for a fortnight and just have it get it over and done with? Do you see what I mean? And try something different. So people were phoning me up from God knows wherever going, you know, what's it like? And I was going, it's not too bad, you know, and things like that. Mild virus. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to give you one or two little charts. I'm going to go on about this a reasonable amount because I think it's quite interesting. Okay, so one of the things...
I think there was a question.
Oh, yeah, go on.
So what about if the authorities just do nothing then, they don't, like, react? Or they just ignore it?
Your design challenge is to make the repression option and the do nothing option equally unpleasant for the opposition. Yeah. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. If the doing nothing option isn't actually that costly, they'll just do nothing. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Because they don't want to go and repress you. I'll just give you a good example of this in a minute. So they've got to be even, which is quite a design challenge sometimes, because obviously, you know, these things, it's not like go to the supermarket and buy it. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit, you're in a semi-chaotic system. But the idea, as you can see here, so this one was down here, then you just go, let them get on with it. Do you see what I mean? Yeah, so they both need to be up here, and the other criteria need to pass this negotiation line, as you might say, this binary where they go, no, we're not going to negotiate, and then suddenly, oh, all right, we are. Do you see what I mean? So this comes on to a little interesting bit of psychology here, or how these things go. And one of the reasons why people get really confused about it. So with King's College Climate Emergency, one of the funny things about it was we decided to spray chalk the King's College Central Hall. So it was about 8 of us, and we went in and spray chalked for about 5 minutes, and I don't know if you've seen the video, it's quite funny. Well, it's not funny, but it is funny. But the whole place was like covered in spray chalk. And interestingly enough, as you would predict, the vice principal was down within 5 minutes, right? So he'd been trying to talk to this guy for 3 months, but then he suddenly appeared after 3 or 4 minutes. And then the first thing he said is, this is terrible, this is really terrible, this is really terrible. You know, this sort of activity shuts down the conversation. It shuts down the conversation, it's really upset. And I said to him, well, this is the first conversation we've ever had. You see what I mean? So if you become a professional sort of troublemaker, it's a bit like being a therapist, you know, with alcoholics. I think there's a lot of similarity. Yeah. Basically, what you're doing is if you're a professional therapist, you get used to people lying to you. Do you see what I mean? Because, maybe you've got the alcoholic in front of you and you say, well, you've got a drink, but no, I haven't, sort of thing. And then suddenly there'll be a point where he'll go, oh, yeah, I have. Do you see what I mean? But you have to build up this hostility towards you. Do you see what I mean? So the name of the game for the opposition, of course, is always to deny that direct action works. Because if they accepted that direct action works in the space of conflict, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Do you see what I mean? Because they sort of accept that what you're doing is okay. So they have to maintain the lie that it's not working. And you can see this in labour struggles, can't you? When the people go on the tube, it's like the bosses always start off by going, this is antisocial behaviour. We just don't, on principle, we don't talk to these people. Do you know what I mean? This is against the rules. We just don't agree with these tactics, so we're not going to talk to you. So you could see this sort of building up, and then suddenly, of course, they're going to flip and they're going to decide they are going to talk to you. But even after the struggle is over, they'll still be saying, well, we did it because we decided this was a decent thing to do. They're not ever going to admit that it was because of direct action. So as a social scientist, of course, your job is to actually find what the causal factors are, right? So the causal factor in having a victory in a social struggle is not the decency of the elites, right? It's not, because if they were decent, they wouldn't have had to have the struggle in the first place. Do you see what I mean? The causal factor is disruption, and it's proportionate. The more disruption, in principle, the more likely you're going to win. Okay, but in the field of battle, as it were, the opposition will completely deny that empirical reality. So you have to sort of get used to it, and obviously the audience is going to get confused. The people watching it are going to go to you, say, you've really upset these people. You've really upset them. You don't want to do that because they're not going to. They're not. The big line is the more you upset them, the more they're not going to talk to you. Now, I have to tell you that that's not correct. Okay. So, I don't like upsetting people, so I'm being, vigorously empirical here. But it's not true. It's not true. Okay. I'll show you a little graph in a minute. But the general rule is the more you upset them, the more likely you are to win. Now, obviously, it does overdoing it. You know what I mean? If you're going to smash the guy's head in, it might not be a good idea. Okay? But so once you get onto violence, you've got a whole load of different dynamics. But as a social scientist, I can tell you, on the basis of my research and on the basis of non-violent theory and practice, is the more you upset them, the more you get the goods. Okay? But you have to become professional to get that in your head. Do you see what I mean? Because we've all been brought up to think upsetting people is not a great idea. I'll give you a few little examples here, which are a bit funny. So there was a campaign called Life Not Money, which we did after King's College climate emergency. So the deal there was that the cleaners were on strike, and we thought we'd do this sort of radical left sort of move, which we thought was quite funny, was to ask the director to take a 10% pay cut, because she was on 500,000 a year, or at least the main directors. Presumably everyone knows this. Used to get about 100,000, and suddenly they got 500,000, and everyone else was taking a pay cut, which seems reasonably unfair. So we said, hey guys, you can give this money to the cleaners. So obviously it was a little bit surreal, sort of Robin Hoodish, as it were. But the gambit was that we would go and spray chalk the walls of King's College. So the design element here was they wouldn't be able to cope with no action, because they can't tolerate spraying the roads and walls, right, of King's College. It was just spray chalk, so it wasn't that bad. And what we were trying to do, sounds a bit weird, but what we were trying to do was to do it 3 or 4 times, and then we'd go to court 3 or 4 times, and we made the calculation by the 3rd time, the magistrates would put us in prison. So you can imagine this was the backfiring gambit, right? Do you see what I mean? That LSE would go, those terrible people, they keep spray chalking, we're going to send them to court. The magistrates would put them in prison. And then the big backfiring effect would be students sent to prison for campaigning against £500,000 wages for top of LSE. Right? So LSE's got this massive liberal, we're great, we're sensible, rational people routine. That's their global brand. And then we would be there in prison for a week, having a nice time because it's nice to read some books. And then they would, there'd be a massive embarrassment. I mean, a chronically massive embarrassment, right? So what we did here is we underdid the activity and overdid the consequences of repression. So what they did, instead of going for repression, they just let us get on with it. Okay? So slightly miscalculated. So I can actually show this quite concretely because we were arrested and blah, 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 and then we were about to do it. We sort of worked out we're going to do it day after day sort of thing, and we did it 3 times. And the first time, we were sitting in the road and all the plastic, we had spray chalk and everything. I think great stuff, and then the riot police arrived and all these police officers, and we're thinking great stuff because we're professionals and ready to get arrested again and have a nice rest and what have you. And the police came up to us and said, oh, you're standing in the road, sitting in the road, that's illegal. And we're going, that's right. Do you want to arrest us? Yeah, we're going to arrest you. Do you want handcuffs? All that sort of thing. And we're going, okay, fair enough. And we're going, good stuff. And then 5 hours later, we were still there. And we sort of noticed these LSE people had just come out and obviously had a word with the police to say, oh, we don't want them arrested. Do you see what I mean? So after 5 hours, we sort of got up feeling rather bored and disenchanted and had to walk past these riot police vans or whatever and potted off back home. So you see, this is interesting, isn't it? You can see the dynamics here because LSE people are obviously quite intelligent. That's why they're LSE. And they'd sussed out that it would be better just to let us do it. Do you see what I mean? So you can see these weird conflicting logics here. The conventional logic is great, they got let off. But that wasn't what we were trying to do. You see what I mean? So then they basically won in inverted commas because we got the design a little bit wrong. But we could probably project the idea that if we had gone to prison, obviously it'd be it'd be explosive, to put it mildly. So interestingly enough, later on in that conflict, I've forgotten the name of the union, but it's a great union that organises, casualised workers in London. They were doing, for 6 months, they were having these big marches, A to B sort of marches. So they weren't having a lot of effect, right? There wasn't that much disruption, right? And they were, the leader of the union was phoning me up saying these LSE people are terrible. Their negotiation line was really high because LSE people don't like to have to admit anything because whatever, they're quite corporate, to put it mildly. So the line was really high and their disruption was too low. Do you see what I mean? But then they had this great idea, which was maybe inadvertent or by design, which they decided to have these big, loud demonstrations while the students were doing their exams, right? Boom, right? So what's the prediction? So doing nothing just went massively costly, right? Because you have all these students going, my dad's, the head of Saudi Arabia or whatever, and he's going to get you, and you better get me through my exams without these pesty £4 an hour immigrant cleaners making a noise outside the window. Do you see what I mean? So LSE were obviously sweating a little bit about it, and also, of course, all these students were saying, "You terrible people, you're doing us in." So there was all this, "You're upsetting people. You can't upset people. You can't upset people." But because the leader of the union was a professional, he was going, "Yeah. This is fine. Upsetting people's good." Do you see what I mean? Because it's going to get the goods. And then after just a week of doing this, they were in the room, right? And they won. Not only did they win a pay rise, they won being brought back in to the, they weren't outsourced, and all that business. So after 20 years of being outsourced and generally screwed over by everyone and everyone, then they were back in the system. Now, obviously, no doubt they tried to get around it. I don't know what the post story is. But leaving that aside, you can see how it won, right? Because they didn't want to do the repression option because arresting cleaners would be a bit tricky. And it was technically legal anyway, which is always great. They didn't want to do the no action thing because they were going to get sued and all their students. Do you see what I mean? So it passed the negotiation line. It's a binary. So they were going, no. We're not negotiating. Bang, now we are negotiating. Do you see what I mean? So King's College Climate Emergency, you're probably familiar with that. But that was a straightforward blast through the negotiation line. So for 4 years, you had all the, sitting on committees, saying, please divest, next generation would like to have a life, that sort of thing, but and King's College going, yes, great idea, join the committee, do a report, do a committee on the report, do a report on the committee's report on the, this routine. So, it didn't get anywhere for 4 years, or they said they would divest from tar sands, at some point before 2029, if they could. Something sort of useless. So we came along, or I came along, to be honest, and said, let's do some direct action. And they said, no, we don't want to do that because, it's going to ruin our relationships and we don't want to upset people. So that came in. And then what we did, as some of you know, is we spray chalked £10,000 worth of damage, and then I went on hunger strike, and the vice principal of King's College was going, Roger, whatever you want, I'll do, quote. And within 4 weeks later, they completely changed their policy. They had an emergency finance meeting, because when you're dealing with institutions, you may be familiar with this, they always go, yes, well, this is a great idea, but the committee is not meeting till next July. Do you know what I mean? What you have to understand about all this is that organisations are social constructions, right? It's not physics here. If crises happen, people change. Do you see what I mean? So again, it's all about the level of disruption, okay? So what they did on this one is obviously it was an unacceptable level of disruption. They couldn't be seen to do nothing. So after we spray chalked the college, the big central hall, they suspended me, okay? So they went for the repression option, and they're having this big debate. Whenever you do this sort of thing, the duds and the hawks, as it were, and the opposition will be like this, because they really don't know which one to go for, because it is a genuine dilemma, right? So they suspended me and said I was banned from King's College. And then, like 12 days later, they readmitted me, okay? Because they knew it was just a backfiring effect. Do you see what I mean? So they failed, miserably failed, because of the power of the non-violent direct action, okay? So, and then, within 4 weeks, they completely changed their policy, otherwise known as successful negotiation. Thank you very much. What I'm trying to communicate here is that this isn't just some esoteric theory, right? This is the heart of saving the world, right? If you don't believe me, it is, okay? This is it, okay? This is how you do it, all right? And obviously there's nuance around it. And obviously you might be scared, and we can talk about that later on, because it is scary going against the powers that be, but that's another story. All we're saying is analytically, this is the way to do it. So I'll give you two more quick examples. Stop killing Londoners, right? So we stop killing Londoners. Basically, the bigger the deal, the higher the negotiation mark, right? It's pretty obvious, okay? So if you're doing some small, semi-pleasant liberal institution like King's, you only have to have one person go on hunger strike, right? If that happened like with Sadiq Khan, then obviously he's a bigger fish, right? So you have to do something bigger. So, so with Stop Killing Londoners, the idea was the pollution, it's killing 10,000 people a year, blah, blah, blah. The Mayor of London was sort of whiff-waffling around, sort of saying he was going to do things, but not very much. So then we decided to do the jail routine on him. So we went and spray chalked Central Hall on day one, and then we went in front of the magistrates. And then on day two, we did it again. And the magistrate said, well, you did it yesterday, I wasn't good, I'm going to put you on bail, you mustn't do it again. And then we did it on day three, and they sort of let us off again, and did it on day four, and someone said, that's not good, I'm going to put you into prison on remand. So he spent like a week in prison, and then that got in the news, first time activists being imprisoned in London for whenever, 30, 40 years, or whatever it is, through conscious design. And then what we got out of it was a chat with the civil servant. In other words, if you go to get something from Sadiq Khan, it's nothing personal, right? It's that political institution, like a city government, you're going to have more than 5 people go to prison. So my sort of wild guess would be 50, okay? So if you've got 50, then you do it. Now, of course, all the emails coming from the London government were going, dear Roger, we very much understand that you are, you're very passionate about this, but you must understand that we cannot respond to direct action. Sounds familiar? Okay? That's a lie, okay? What they're saying is you haven't caused enough trouble. All right? That's how it works. Do you see what I mean? So as a social scientist, that's how you've got to interpret it. And as a professional social change activist, that's how you have to interpret it. But what, as I said, is this big battle for people who don't understand these dynamics, because you'd be sitting in a meeting and someone say, Roger, he says he's not going to respond to direct action, so what's the point of doing it? Do you see what I mean? Yeah, so you're going to get that, or you're going to get, this is really antisocial, spray chalking a democratic institution or something, But, if you've got enough people to do it, you can guarantee change happens. There's plenty of examples where city governments have succumbed to, bottom-up political struggle. Okay, and the last one, of course, is saving the world with Extinction Rebellion. I'll tell you about that, won't be a sec. Okay, so with saving the world, with climate change, this is quite a big deal, as you can see. So what's the name of the game? Is you've got to bring down all the regimes in the world, ideally simultaneously, and replace them with national assemblies of ordinary people that aren't corrupted by big money interests. That's the object.
Aren't we all corrupted by big money?
Yeah, maybe. Okay, that's a simplified. So it doesn't take, if you're following my analysis, you probably sussed out that you're going to have to do something pretty big. Okay? But what we have got in our little pack of cards is the backfiring effect. So the model here is what I call the civil resistance model. Okay, it is possible to bring down governments. Right, it happens regularly, about every 2 or 3 years in the global south. So you can go down to the global south and actually study what they do. And it goes like this: they go into the capital city with 10 to 30,000 people. They stay there day after day. The police come out, hit some of them on the head, do something quite unpleasant or not. And then more people come in because of the backfiring effect, okay? And as we said, the big sort of tipping point here is when more people come into the system than the authorities can take out. Do you see what I mean? So, for instance, I'm going to do a talk on the Children's March in March. So you should all come to that. It's great fun. And basically, all these black kids went into Birmingham, Alabama, right? And they were just going, right, we've had enough of segregation. We're just going to come into the centre of Birmingham and just, do illegal stuff such as be there because we're not supposed to be there because we're black and all that stuff. So they all got arrested. So on day one, 1,000 of them got arrested. So it's a bit like the authorities were going, take that. Do you see what I mean? But unfortunately, once you've arrested 1,000 people, 50,000 kids are going, same cultural group, emotional contact, all that sort of thing. They were going, hang on a minute. This isn't on, we're going to go down, okay? So the following day, they arrested 3,000 kids, okay? And then you might think, oh, well, where's the tipping point here? But then even more kids came down on the third day. Do you see what I mean? After 7 days, 70 years of segregation collapsed. They destroyed 70 years of segregation in a week, right? So it's the same dynamic as King's College climate emergency. It's just on a larger scale. Do you see what I mean? So what's going to happen in London on April the 15th is the design challenge is to get 10 to 30,000 people to be in the streets every day, right? So this is like turbocharged dynamics, right? So the reason why you have to be in every day, of course, is doing nothing, no action, becomes intolerable for the regime because everyone starts running out of, food in pret-a-manger's. Do you see what I mean? And we all know that once that happens, the regime will fall. So what they'll do, of course, and you might think, oh, this is being recorded and they'll find out about it, but it's a checkmate move, do you see what I mean? Because they're in this impossible dilemma, because they can't leave you there, because obviously that's a no-no, because the rich and powerful in Mayfair are going, hang on a minute, I can't get out, blah, blah, blah. And then, so they're going to have to go for a repression option. But if they go for the repression option, they're going to have to arrest 1,000 people, right? Assuming we maintain non-violent discipline. Obviously, if it all becomes a riot, they'll have a great time because then they can just pretend that it's just antisocial elements. But if it's a big cross-section of the national community, which hopefully it will be, then they'll have all these things on the 6 o'clock news, with 10-year-old kids and 84-year-old grannies getting dragged off by the police. And all the people in the middle suburbs of London are going to go, oh, hang on a minute, this isn't good. We don't do this sort of thing in Britain. And they're going to come down the following day, and then we're going to have like Pink Floyd or what's left of them sort of doing a gig. And, so we're going to get 20,000 down for that. So we're going to throw that sort of dice. Do you see what I mean? But you can see the mathematics of it. I know this is very analytical, but that's what this talks about. Okay, the analytics here is if they go for the repression option, they're basically shaking a dice. Do you see what I mean? If they take more people out of the system than come in, they've won, right? But they can't predict that with any accuracy because it's a complex system, okay? And you never know what the people of Hackney are going to think. Do you see what I mean? The people of Hackney might go, hang on a minute, I don't really like these hippies, but on the other hand, the government's shit and we just had Brexit and we're going to come down, check it out, and then they check it out, and you can guarantee you, if they come down to check it out within half an hour, they'll be sitting on the road, right? Because it's cool, because you like to do what other people are doing. And this incidentally is what happened on Friday with the Children's March, right? So all these kids were coming into central London, right? And like 10% of them decide to go and sit in the road because they're pissed off, rightly so. And then half the rest of them follow them into the road, right? They haven't been on big trainings, they haven't read books or anything. They were just going, this is cool, it's better than school. Do you see what I mean? So it's not like, you need to get out of the headset of thinking this is all about sacrifice and unpleasantness and duty and all that sort of stuff, right? This is fun. This is something that you can tell your grandchildren about. Do you see what I mean? This is what life is about. It's doing something amazing with loads of other people. So this is why, despite what everyone's been told, that you can't change the system, you can, because once you get to this tipping point, loads of people want to be in on the act. So that's you can see how the design is working for the rebellion on April the 15th. Day after day, blocking the roads, non-violent discipline, shake the dice, see what comes out of it. And the demonstration effects, of course, will be a win anyway, because they'll be out of the bag. So there's kids like blocking roads in Munich now because they've stopped killing Londoners. Do you see what I mean? They've seen it and gone, we don't just want to stand with a placard, we want to sit in the road. All right, just to summarise then, for those of you that are a bit nerdy, come on, admit it. So the NGO strategy, you're causing a little bit of disruption, but you're not really being very effective, yeah? So classical sort of non-violence, as you might say, if I go to a group in London, particularly if they're activists, they'll probably choose this to say, Roger, yeah, we understand non-violence is a good idea, so we're going to cause quite a lot of disruption, okay? But we don't want to cause too much because we're going to upset people, right? So if you have Children's March sort of guys who sit down with them and they'll say to me, Roger, we don't want to upset people too much because, we're nice people, okay? Well, the optimum point is about here. So the optimum point is actually 2 or 3 steps above what you might call decent civil disobedience. That's the optimum point. So, for instance, like, we stopped killing, with King's College Climate Emergency, the plan was to go in and put a few symbols and slogans on the wall. But there were 4 groups and we were all quite nervous and we all sort of didn't know what each other were doing. And by the end of 5 minutes, you just basically plastered the whole lot and caused £10,000 worth of damage inadvertently without really planning it. Okay, so we sort of hit this point. Do you see what I mean? And obviously, as I said, like 4 weeks later, they were just in total panic and agreed. Do you see what I mean? But if we had, I'm just being analytical here, if we had sort of, gone in with pickaxes and destroyed all those, nice colonial statues or whatever, then obviously that could have been tipped the balance. So the danger, of course, is there's a rapid decline, and that rapid decline is when you get into violence. Do you see what I mean? So it's a bit tricky because you don't want to get into violence, but disruption and property damage in particular is good stuff, as long as it's open and it's non-violent and respectful, which I'll come on to in a minute. So that's the sort of takeaway from it. I don't expect many people will do this, but that's the result of my research, and I'm supposed to be here to tell you what the deal is. So let's over-egg the pudding a bit. Okay, sorry, I've rambled on quite a lot, but I think that's really, really like mind-blowingly important. Yeah.
Where would you place the Yellow Vest movement, the French one?
About there. Okay? Because they're not like killing people. Killing people is about here, right? Which is a total waste of time, apart from being immoral. But yeah, the reason... I don't want to get into the dynamics of violence because I'm sort of assuming everyone's not into that, so I'm trying to be quite pragmatic. But the dynamics of violence are that as soon as you cross into, or as soon as you lose non-violent discipline, it doesn't matter if only 2% of your people being violent, that's neither here nor there. As soon as you've got violence in the mix, then basically the state's got an excuse to repress it. And gradually you'll find that the violent people take over the movement because the people that are non-violent tend to exit, particularly young people and old people, so it becomes more of a young man thing. And on the other side of the equation, the middle ground will start sliding towards the elites because of fear of disorder. Do you see what I mean? I mean, there's other dynamics involved. But the upshot of it is a bit of a waste of time. But obviously lots of people fetishize it on the left, and also obviously it's sort of understandable, and disorganized movements often are violent because people are very upset. So, you know, the name of the game here, obviously, and what I'm trying to communicate through this research is if you want to win, you've got to think about it before you do it. Do you see what I mean? And you need to design it. So this is what Martin Luther King did. They didn't say, oh, you know, let's shake a dice and go to somewhere in the global south, right? They said, right, let's do like 3 months of planning. And they'd get all the intelligence they could. You know, where are the fascists? Because we want to go to the fascists because we want to do a backfiring effect. Do you see what I mean? So what I'm trying to communicate to you guys is do the homework. Do you see what I mean? And then you'll be 10 times more effective. And that's why, you know, my thesis is that's why half of these things were groundbreaking. Do you see what I mean? We did the first rent strike ever in 30 years. You know, we did the quickest win of a divestment campaign ever. And Extinction Rebellion is the biggest, newest social movement on the scene. Why? It's not just a coincidence. It's because we've actually looked at literature, we've done loads of field research, and we know these basic principles. Do you see what I mean? And obviously not all of them are successful because it's a complex system, but this is what's going to maximise the probability of success. Hang on a minute. You're going to all have a little chat together, otherwise we get a bit confused. So if you've got a question, the idea is you ask the other people in your group and they answer it for you, and then it's more participatory, and through the act of speech you'll feel enormously empowered and what have you. And then in about 5 minutes we'll go on to the weird subject of love. Okay, so off you go. Did anyone have a question that the other people couldn't answer for you? Hopefully not. Yeah, go on.
So you said with the LSE pay dispute that you fully expected that the institution had found a way around it and now things had sort of returned to normal, but you haven't really tracked it. Does any of this allow embedding or changing the system of the institution to maintain the change so that the pay they don't find a way around the pay change, or the revolution effectively continues?
Well, without getting overly complicated about it, my proposition is the dynamics are the same on every scale. Okay, but obviously if you're going to take on a bigger opponent or a more structural problem, then you have to have more resources in order to cause more trouble, to get to the point and the negotiation point. And that's obviously the central sort of headbutt basically of changing the world, which is people go, you only can change something little because you haven't got many resources. So you change something little because you haven't got many resources, but you haven't changed anything big, so things stay the same, versus you try to change something that's big, but you haven't got any many resources, so you fail, so you might as well have changed a small thing, but when you change a small thing, it doesn't really change things, and the whole debate goes round in circles for the last 200 years, right? So the central innovation of non-violent theory and practice is the backfiring effect. Okay, so this is the thing that basically propels you from 20 people in a room to 20,000 people in 2 months. Okay, so this happens over and over and over again, right? You just need to look at the empirics, right? Look at civil resistance struggles in the South. You know, you get the 10 workers, they go out into Delhi, they get shot. The following day, there's 50,000 people in the street. You know, they arrest 3,000 of them. Then there's 500,000 in the street and the regime falls, right? Happens very quickly. And, you know, there's big downsides to that. Do you see what I mean? So, so for instance, like the gambit with LSE is we get put into prison, okay? And in my scholarly judgment, as it were, I can't guarantee this, but you'd be in the ballpark of getting the first director of an elite university institution to take a pay cut because it just create a shitstorm. Do you see what I mean? Loads of people would be coming out onto the street going, hang on a minute, this isn't on. You've got to put students into prison because you want to keep £500,000 a year. And then you would get structural change. And the experiment, this comes back to telling the truth, is in a revolutionary context, i.e., if you're unfortunately you weren't, I don't think, on the first session, but my argument was in a revolutionary context is this is a sociological category, right? I'm not making a moral judgment about what's good or an ideological judgment. I'm looking at the sociology of revolution, where the sociologists will say that a revolutionary context is when there's extreme social repression. That what that means is everyone wants X, but no one can get it because no one else is going for it. Do you see what I mean? So there's one guy running the whole show. Everyone hates him, but no one's going to stick their head above the parapet because they're going to get shot or something. Do you see what I mean? Or in a neoliberal Western democracy sense, everyone knows the elites will run off with all the money and they're all going to kill us because they don't want to change climate change, but no one wants to do it because it's easier to sit at home watching a video on Sunday night. Do you see what I mean? It's the same sort of thing. It's like a fear problem or a distraction problem, but the upshot is the same. You see what I mean? So the way out of that is to have the shining light of truth, as it were, and you get your true believers behind that shining light. They march out into the field of battle, hit on the head, and that creates a massive upsurgence of enthusiasm. So you can see this with the bridges in November with Extinction Rebellion. Everyone's going, climate change, what the fuck, something should be happening, nothing happening. Oh my God, there's 6,000 people on a bridge, on the bridge of London. Whoosh, everyone suddenly gets empowered, or at least 0.5% of the population do, which is all you need to go, I'm going to do that. Do you see what I mean? So you've got that pathway towards mobilisation. So my proposition is, if you're in a revolutionary context, if you're in a reformist context, i.e. everything's just about all right, then it's a dead duck. But in a revolutionary context where you've got these massive structural contradictions and it's getting worse at exponential rate, then it's just a matter of time before someone calls out the whole institution or the whole system. But as you can imagine at LSE, the whole logic of the left at LSE was, we just want to have an incremental win. Do you see what I mean? So I got into a lot of trouble because I was just going, I was doing Emperor Without Clothes routine. Do you see what I mean? But we haven't done Emperor Without a Clothes routine since, 1979 in this country. Do you see what I mean? Because everyone's gone for something nice and let's just, one step at a time. Do you see what I mean? So there's quite different logics. Sorry, it's going on quite a bit there. Is there another question before I... Yeah.
I had a curiosity because the graph, from my perspective, relies on a capitalist democratic system that has a value on being seen as ethically moral. Whereas, does it apply to a system that is autocratic, communist, and not concerned with ethical appearances? So, for example, like Tiananmen Square and things like that, where there is very little concern with how outward appearances are seen to the world. Does that graph become higher, or is there a need for a rework, or?
Well, my analysis of authoritarian regimes is there's two differences. One is the negotiation point is loads higher, right? Because they definitely don't want to give up their power. Do you see what I mean? But the countervailing dynamic is the backfiring effects are more intense. So then you throw those into a complex system, and the outshot is there's no particular difference between this methodology in an authoritarian regime or a less authoritarian regime. Do you see what I mean? If anything, the most problematic context is a Western democracy, counterintuitively. And that's because in a highly authoritarian regime, basically the dice is really important. Do you see what I mean? Because you could get it totally right, which obviously the Chinese communists did in 1989. They went in, repressed really hard, and so hard that the thing didn't recover. Do you see what I mean? But it could, if they'd done it, say, 10% less, they could have totally failed. Do you see what I mean? And this is an understanding of complexity. We brought it, a lot of our culture thinks, that big changes require big changes of inputs, but they don't. So, yeah. Yeah.
Just following up on that, isn't it, because the tipping point when it goes into something negative is violence, and if you have an authoritarian regime, and obviously military police or whatever uses violence a lot faster, and then people get a lot angrier and hit back with violence, how could you still, like, is there anything that could help to still maintain the non-violent action, even though somebody else uses violence already? Or like the same thing, like let's say in a month's time here, some people get too eager and start using violence, like how can you help controlling to keep it non-violent?
Well, historically, the civil resistance model relies upon having an organised infrastructure. So that's probably the research on why, I'll put that down, why civil resistance works. One of the key factors in it is how organised the activists are. And that's basically a proxy for whether people are trained or not, which basically is a proxy for getting people to maintain non-violent discipline. That's the key thing. So when we're going into, when we go into April the 15th, our biggest thing is on every piece of paper, you're going to be saying this is non-violent. This is a non-violent deal. If you don't want it to do that, then that's cool, you can go somewhere else. Do you see what I mean? Because that's like absolutely critical, because as I've explained, the dynamic is, which you rightly alluded to, is if you get people being violent towards you, you need to understand what's going on. You need to have that logic, you know, or at least you need some people to understand the logic of passive resistance is actually the most effective way of dealing with it, to maximise the probabilities of success. Again, there's no guarantees, right? You're just maximising probabilities here. And herding effects are such that if you get like 10, 20% and maintain non-violent discipline, then the rest of the people will take their lead from that. Do you see what I mean? So for instance, like with the children, the school strikes at the moment, right? So I was there on Friday, so there's all these kids, you know, spontaneously going to road. And you know, lots of people going, oh, this is amazing, you know, kids are doing it for themselves. And I'm going, fuck, this is right, really scary. Because I know from my research that like 6 months down the line, there's going to be a riot. Because those guys aren't disciplined enough, or there's not enough of them that are disciplined enough to maintain some sort of control. Do you see what I mean? So it's not like they all have to be like super, you know, Gandhis or anything. But there needs to be, my argument this week is we need to have non-violent direct action trainings for teenagers in London so they understand all this. Do you see what I mean? In about half an hour. So if anyone's really good at communicating to teenagers, come and see me. Because basically, seriously speaking, is probably the biggest factor on whether we're going to save the world or not, is whether young people maintain non-violent discipline. Because all social movements start off with spontaneous, joyful spasms of non-violence, right? That's how it always starts off with that. Okay? But if you study enough of the case studies, then you know that they get to a certain point where they get really mad, because they'll get madder and madder because nothing's going to happen, right? So if they're not disciplined, then it will obviously start moving into violence, and then you've got, you know, you've got the whole hard left elements and the violent element, you know, and it just ends up in tears, and you just get all the angry young men out there, and all the girls will be going home. You know, that's, you know, I'm not making any moral judgments. That's just 101 social disruption. That's how it goes. And you've seen that in France, of course, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
On the topic, I just want to ask, what do you think we can do in a situation where police or government implants people like in a big like situation like the 15,000 kids on the road, and like something looks like it's them creating violence, but it's not. Like this has happened in previous movements. Is there like a practical way of like maybe, I don't know, the group like seeing all this one song and like removing them from the circle of, I don't know, I'm just curious.
Well, again, historically, like it's not like an unusual problem, okay? It's not like, hey, this hasn't happened before, like it's happened like 200 times before. Do you see what I mean? So you just have to look at the literature and see what people do. So as I said, the structural response to it is preparation, right? So if people are aware of the problem beforehand, and then you get a critical mass of people that understand non-violent discipline, then that's less likely to happen. And then you've got like solutions in the field, as it were, which is you have non-violent maintenance squads, or in different cultures and contexts, called different things, but they're the people who will go up to the violent people and through either shaming or humour or physical restraint will stop them. Okay, and there's variations on the theme of that. So usually in unorganised protests, you have like what's called the bystander effect, which is, 99% of the people want to maintain non-violence, 1% are doing the black bloc routine or whatever, and everyone's going, that's fucking crap. But no one's going to do anything because they're always waiting for someone else to do it, right? So you're just standing there and everyone's feeling a bit rubbish. So the solution to that is you have groups of people that are already pre-trained to go up to those guys and say, that's not the deal here. Do you know what I mean? Or variations on the theme. Particularly effective, you get grandmothers to do it, apparently. Son! Don't you have any shame? And this is why, like young people and old people basically run the show, right? This theory is based upon young people and old people basically taking the forefront. It's not young men and routine. They can go and, do the theory like me. Anyway, okay, so is that enough? Because I've got to do love. We're 8:45. So
you're going to give a name to your theory, just with optimum and what's
no, I'm not very good at all that sort of thing. But it's just like standard non-violence. I'll give you some references at the end. My proposition is that I'm not really telling you anything new here, right? If you're in 1965 and you went to a civil rights training, they'll just be telling you the same thing. The problem is from 1989 till the whole my adult life. I was at the fag end of the sort of 1980s peace movement where people still understood this stuff, but for 30 years it's been like all we have are black bloc or NGO emailing. Do you see what I mean? So this centre ground has been lost. And when I came to London, I was suggesting people get arrested or go to prison. I was looked upon as a bit of a Martian. But gradually, like, this culture is changing, and people are saying this is what every generation has to do to maintain a decent society.
But it's always the Martians that really make the world change.
Yeah, let's hope so. Anyway, right, so so I want to add on something which is a little bit controversial. So and I sort of deliberated quite a lot in my head about whether I was going to put this in my PhD, but I decided to just fuck it and I'm just going to go for it. So I'm going this chapter on love. So the first thing I want to say about this concept of love is I'm not actually talking about love, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what love used to mean, not what it means in a modern sort of soppy context, right? So just to save myself some embarrassment, right? I'm not talking about sentimental romantic love here, right? That's not what I'm talking about. But unfortunately, the word love has been appropriated into this consumerist sort of sloppy sort of notion. I'm more interested in what you might call the classical notion of love, which is a Christian notion or a 20th century notion. And I quite like Erich Fromm's definition. I don't know if you know Erich Fromm, but it's quite a big name in the mid-20th century. It's a bit out of fashion now, but I think it was cool. And he wrote this book called The Art of Loving, and you think, it's about, sex positions or something. But it's not, right? It's quite boring. But it's basically saying love is basically, first of all, it's an act, okay? It's an act. It's not a feeling, okay? And secondly, he's saying it's an act of will. Okay, so his construction is you can not like someone, but you can engage in the act of love towards them. Do you see what I mean? Which is quite a counterintuitive notion. But this is very much, there's a secularized version of the notion of love in Christian theology, which is a militant, aggressive, and highly sort of charged idea, right? The Christian idea of love, if you want to look into that, is nothing to do with being nice, right? It's about militantly going against your selfishness. Do you see what I mean? And acting in benefit of others. So what was sort of interesting is in the history of sort of like non-violence theory, just to give a sort of 2-minute version of it, in the early 20th century when Tolstoy got hold of it, he's sort of the origin of it, War and Peace guy, he decided, everything should be lovey-dovey and people should be peaceful, and he was a pacifist and anarchist and various other things. And he influenced Gandhi. And for the first half of the 20th century, there was this very strong notion that non-violence was a very moral thing. Do you know what I mean? You had to, go into meditation for a month before you went and got beaten up by the police. This was the whole Gandhi idea. And it was a bit like, you had to sort of spiritually evolve and what have you, which, arguably had stuff going on for it. And then this guy called Gene Sharp came along in the 1950s, and he was an atheist and everything, and he was just going, look, like a lot of in that time in the 1950s, behavioralism was a big thing. And it's basically like, forget all the beliefs, right? What we're going for is what actually has to happen. What behaviors create this product? So it became quite reductionist and secular and non-moral. So what Gene Sharp was doing, a bit like the presentation I've done so far, is you do A, it will lead to B, and that's better than C. Do you see what I mean? So a lot of those guys were basically military theorists, right? Without the violence. Do you see what I mean? So if you read a book about military theory, you'll see a lot of the same dynamics, right? And that's because non-violence people basically borrowed it. That's why you have things like campaigns, do you see what I mean? And opponents and all. It's very much a military language. But that's not because they were violent. It was more because they were thinking in that quite reductive, materialistic way. So originally I was quite attracted to that idea because, it seems like, well, that's attractive. And certainly the Gene Sharp School of Nonviolence has been massively influential in the Global South because it's quite transcultural. It's a bit like, I don't care what, whether you're a Buddhist or a Christian or an atheist, this is how you bring down the regime. Do you see what I mean? Because you don't want some, white male Westerner sort of doing some patronising thing on people in the Global South. They just want to know what is the deal. Do you see what I mean? And the deal is this: maintain civil disobedience, maximise disruption, undermine the pillars of the state, backfiring effect, regime collapses, hey, you don't get tortured anymore. Do you see what I mean? It's like pretty bang, 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 bang like that. So when I started doing my research, I was, trying to be a proper, materialist. I'm going, right, so, we do this, we paint on the wall, we get invited into the the room, we make our demand, they accept it, we win. Do you see what I mean? But during the last 4 years, one of the interesting things about doing fieldwork is you realise how sort of like simplified reductive analysis is. Do you see what I mean? Because you probably all know this, if you look at relationships and things like that, you might read a book on relationships and it just reduced to some simple formula, but everyone knows after you've failed at various things in life that, it's actually complicated business. Do you see what I mean? And these feelings and things like that. So one of the things that I was sort of battling against personally in my research was thinking there's something else going on. Yeah, there's something else going on apart from, I'm going to take away your money. Do you see what I mean? And the thing that seems to be going on is a certain psychological relationship between people. And I would provocatively say that this is the dynamics of love. Love defined as what people wanting to give things to each other and receive things from each other. Do you see what I mean? And this seems to be a very powerful dynamic in human relations. So what I want to emphasise, I want to emphasise two things. One is, I'm not saying I'm very good at loving people, okay? That's the first thing, don't get me wrong with that, it's irrelevant. And secondly, I am going to take a social scientific viewpoint on this. So there has been quite a lot of research in how you get things by being nice to people. Do you see what I mean? To cut a long story short. So I'll give you, the thing that sort of brought it home with me was in the King's College climate emergency thing. So, we had this nice materialistic analysis, spray chalk the walls, go and see the vice principal, bang on the table, get the deal, right? But as soon as I entered the room, I just felt like there was a whole load of other dynamics going on. And the dynamics was something like he was scared of me and I was scared of him. And I thought, if I'm respectful towards him, hopefully he'll be respectful towards me. And then we'll build up a rapport. And then suddenly it sort of becomes more important to have a nice relationship than to fulfill our structural positions in the economic arrangement of society. So this is quite counterintuitive and radical notion, of course, because if you read all the books on politics, it's all like, he's the bad guy, we're the good guy, bang. Do you see what I mean? So what was interesting was, I'm quite a nice guy anyway, so I don't have a problem being respectful towards people because, I used to be a Methodist and things. So it's a bit like I was going in, I was doing nice middle class routine anyway, which is, I totally understand that, it's difficult being a vice principal. And, he appreciated that. Anyway, the upshot of it is we developed this relationship, and dare I say, we became quite friendly towards each other. And at the end of it, we were sort of like best mates. and there was, at the end of it, like shaking hands, and it was like, oh, this is really nice. And I was thinking, this is a really weird dynamic. Do you know what I mean? And I think part of it is because people want to be liked. And if you do something quite aggressive towards people, there's two possible responses. Either they're aggressive back because they feel defensive, or they try and be nice to you because they're scared of you. Do you see what I mean? A bit of like the mafia sort of thing. And if you're aggressive towards them and disrespectful towards them, then they can flip more. They're more likely to flip into an aggressive mode. Do you see what I mean? And if they flip into an aggressive mode, then they will not come to a deal with you, or they're less likely to come to a deal with you than if you're like having a more, I'm seeking your goodwill. Do you see what I mean? A love approach, as Eric Fromm would put it. So it just seemed like there was this other universe of dynamics. Do you see what I mean? Which weren't so hard as this. So my proposition would be is this the dynamics of love, defined as seeking the well-being of others, basically oil the wheels. Do you see what I mean? So you still need the materialistic analysis. At the end of the day, the vice principal is not going to just come and talk to you, as we've established. But once you've actually done the material disruption, the icing on the cake, as it were, is to go in and be respectful. Now, obviously, there's a question of authenticity here, which we can discuss if you wish, which is, do you be nice to them just so that they do it, or do you be nice because you are nice? Do you see what I mean? But leaving that issue aside, my experience of this is that going into the room and being respectful basically gives you that extra bonus. And to support on this, I've done sort of research on it a little bit, so I'll give you one or two examples. So in negotiation theory, there's this big Harvard study, and as you can imagine, in negotiation theory, there's lots of different ways in which you get what you want, right? You go into a room and you bang on the table, you have a big suit on, or you play soft and then hard. There's all these different ways. Anyway, so they did this meta study of loads of different ways in which to make negotiation work, and it turns out that the biggest causal factor in whether the other side agrees with you or not is whether they personally like you or not. Okay, so that goes against like 200 years of materialistic analysis of human relations. Do you see what I mean? So what it means is that people wanting to be liked or liking each other trumps their materialistic interests from a Marxist point of view. Do you see what I mean? So again, I'm just reporting on the social science. I'm not making any sort of big moral judgments about human nature. All I'm doing is saying, if you want to maximize the probability of success, then respectfulness actually makes it more probable, okay? Aside from whether you think it's moral or not, if you see what I mean. So just looking at this sort of curve here, so the optimum is basically here. So my proposition is, if you're going to do something really full on, you can mitigate the chances of the opposition sort of going into a sort of aggression mode by being really nice to them. So in Rising Up, we have this strategy called max love, max disruption. Do you see what I mean? So, and that sort of sounds quite similar to the literature on like child development and alcoholism and all this sort of thing, which is called tough love, the tough love approach. Do you see what I mean? So we've always been told that there's either being fluffy or there's being aggressive, right? That's what our culture tells us. But again, we've got this new section here called tough love, which is basically, you drag the kid out of the room because he's being violent, but you don't guilt trip him. Do you see what I mean? And the research shows that's the optimal strategy, right? You don't let the kid beat up the other kid because that's being fluffy and just letting injustice carry on. But you don't go in and whack him on the head, take him out and say, you're a little shit. Do you see what I mean? Because then he's going to feel humiliated and he'll go back in a month later. Do you see what I mean? So if you see like the kid kicking another kid, that's basically the elites in this sphere of human relations. So yeah, you've got to go into the elites, drag them away from destroying the world, as it were, and at the same time say it's nothing personal. You see what I mean? And that way, at least some of them, or again, your probability of success is increasing, right? So I'm sure someone's going to ask a question: what happens if the person's a psychopath? Well, if they're a psychopath, it's not going to work. Okay? But apparently that's only 1% of the population. And I can say on record, the vice principal of King's College was not a psychopath. Okay? He's a nice guy, aren't you, Chris? Okay. So is there anything else on that?
In the 1% that are the naughty ones, should we say, there must be some psychopaths.
Oh, yeah. And I think...
1%, 99%.
Yeah, it's 1 in 150 people apparently, isn't it? And they're all collected in the elites. CEOs have a highest proportion of psychopaths apparently, according to research. So you may have a problem with them. So, okay, so you can talk amongst yourselves about that slightly counterintuitive for 5 minutes, and then we'll finish off with sortition, which is a bit of a red herring in a way, but we'll do that last. Okay, off you go. I hope you're all feeling empowered through your self-directed acts of speech, because otherwise you can get your money back. Yeah.
So with Extinction Rebellion, how would the negotiation work in terms of who's coming to the negotiation table then with the when you've disrupted enough to create that they get that there's a response from whatever governments that are in power. So who's coming to the negotiation table?
Well, one idea is to send Greta in to see Theresa May.
Oh yeah.
So that might be a cute idea. Does everyone know Greta? Greta, sorry.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of love strategy, isn't it? Because you send the kids in, they're obviously going to go, oh, a little bit. Well, if you send some aggressive white guy in my age, they're going to go, oh, those nasty, manipulative, King's lecturers. They're going to do. Do you see what I mean? So, yeah, I think I don't know how familiar people are with the Christian sort of dynamics, but a lot of people, when I was younger, I was brought up in the church and things, and I think the general idea was this is quite sort of sentimental, sweet stuff. Jesus, get hit by the turn the other cheek, all that sort of stuff. Like it was slightly silly and sentimental, in my view. But I think actually there's like a real hardcore psychology to love. It actually transforms people, and that's what I'm trying to communicate here. Is if you go in with humility, all those old virtues that people think are a bit, unnecessary in our hard, brutal, neoliberal world, they do seem to have an effect. So, so sending the kids in is probably the deal. With a cake, of course. Anyway, yeah.
Following up on that, what about the idea instead of a headless revolution, there's no one to negotiate with, that they can't be compromised with, and they have to meet the demands? And anyone who does go into court to negotiate, you say, well, they're nothing to do with us, and just keep on the actions until they concede.
Yeah, well, that's another sort of ball game, really, which I haven't really dealt with in these talks. So we can have a chat about that later. But the general assumption of this model is, there is a point at which someone has to talk to someone and do a deal, right? So it's not a sort of anarchist absolutism. Do you know what I mean? It's not like the system will disintegrate of its own accord. The idea is to go in and make the world a better place, but not a perfect place. Do you see what I mean? So there's pros and cons to that. One thing I missed out basically in this section is the role of gifts, which is a sort of a sort of related thing. There's a deep psychological phenomenon that if someone gives you a gift, it's actually really difficult to hate them, and it's enormously powerful. I mean, you think well, whatever, but it's not. It's really, you can look at the research. It's like it's a game changer. So so we've been doing this for quite a while. When I was doing King's College Climate Emergency, I'm an organic farmer, so I gave a salad pack to head of security. And I don't actually know it had an effect, but it was famous, they all know. Do you see what I mean? And when we won, in inverted commas, I gave them 5 salad packs, just to reinforce the point. But there's an interesting case study of Marks and Spencer's, and there was a labour dispute or something, and these campaigners gave them all little crocheted sort of bags or something. Anyway, they were handmade, and they went in and gave them. And basically, in old style language, sort of melted their hearts a bit. And the proposition is that helped them to come to some resolution and give these people better wages. So that's a sort of gift thing. And my mate Robin has just been to the head of Bristol police, and he went in with a carrot cake. So you might think, you imagine some hardened, London radical left people hearing this and having a nervous breakdown, saying how outrageous. But I'm, as I say, I'm just one of these naive social scientists. And my proposition would be that this is actually massively effective relative to what you might call the economic input. Do you see what I mean? You just need to make a cake, and people go, "Oh my God, someone's being nice to me for a change." And the biggest example of this is when you're doing roadblocks. The first 3 roadblocks we did were quite terrifying. We'd stop killing London. So you march into the road, standing there feeling very virtuous and righteous, against pollution. And then some taxi driver would get out, and you think, "Oh my God, this is the moment where I'm going to get hit," And then we got this idea that we'd just give cakes to the people, or offer brownies or whatever, little snacks or whatever to the drivers. So the 2 most respectable elderly people that looked like they were decent and what have you. So we sent them into battle, as it were, amongst the drivers. And of course, most of the drivers are just going to go no, sort of thing, because no. But the whole act of being offered a gift basically completely pacifies the situation. I don't think we had one single aggressive episode after we innovated this routine, and we did it during November. So you think this is all fluffy rubbish, but it's not. Anyway, is there any more questions on this weird and wonderful thing called love? Good. Okay. Right. Okay. So I'll just finish off talking about sortitions. So I'm trying to just blast you with a few different ideas here, so you can sort of change tact a little bit. So I want to sort of, as in this finishing little section, so hopefully only spend 10 minutes on it, is just return to the beginning of what we're trying to do. Because a lot of social scientists would say, you have a campaign and this is how to make it more effective. In other words, they're quite postmodernist. They don't actually care what you're trying to do. It's not grounded in any metaphysical foundations. Do you see what I mean? And from the beginning, I've been saying, yeah, that's sort of half true. Do you know what I mean? Because it doesn't matter to a certain extent. But there is a thing out there called the truth, which is if people shitty to each other, then, it's not good. And that's pretty transcultural. Do you see what I mean? So there is a proposition here. And since the Enlightenment, we've had this proposition that people should be able to decide their own fate through democratic deliberation, right? So that's been the main thesis. And as you can see, it's been pretty good because, things have got a lot better, but we're now heading towards global destruction, and not least because the world's democracies are destroying themselves. So obviously it hasn't quite worked. So I want to finish off by sort of proposing something that a lot of political scientists and political theorists have been thinking about for the last 30 years, is that the proposition of democracy needs some thinking about. Do you see what I mean? So we can't pretend that we're in the 1820s anymore, where we're just going, democracy, great, let's go for it, because we've had 200 years of history and we've seen that things aren't as great as they could be. And we've also had 40 years of psychological research on how human dynamics work. So I'd like us to sort of potentially move on from the sort of working class versus ruling class, overpower them, everything will be hunky-dory routine, right? That's great, it has a lot going for it, but it's not the whole story. And there's an older story, which is to do with political theory. And this is like an undercurrent of my 2 talks, is this thing called power, and there's this old liberal idea, and I don't mean liberal in a fluffy sense, I mean in a really quite vigorous, sort of aggressive sort of a way, which is that human beings have power, and the more power they have, the more corrupt they have. And I'm sure you've probably heard the saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So this is a really powerful, empirically robust idea. So in some ways we can say, deeper than the concept of capitalism or economic inequality, we have a big political problem. And this is what we're grappling with now. We have been grappling with it since the Enlightenment, which is how to tame power. Do you see what I mean? Because we know that when people get it, they tend to go a bit screwy. So, there's a problem here. And I want to just give you a particular viewpoint, which is supported by some psychology and some sort of deliberative democratic sort of theorizing. And it goes a little bit like this. I mean, this is partially my idea, so this is maybe rubbish. But there was the idea, and I think you might find this fantastical because we're in a very different culture, but before like French Revolution, and particularly in the early modern period, there was this notion of the divine right of kings, right? And the idea, you might think this is old rubbish, but if you go back to that period, if you assume there was a God, then the idea is God is in charge and God gives power to a ruler. And the idea behind that was God was pure, the ruler would be just, and he wouldn't be corrupted by sectional interests. Do you see what I mean? So obviously that's, if you don't believe in God, you obviously know that that's rubbish. But if you did believe in God, it had a certain logic to it. Do you see what I mean? Because God is good, obviously absolutely good, and there's this monarch on earth, and some weird and wonderful way, God speaks to the monarch and is above the sexual interest. Do you see what I mean? So the problem with that approach, of course, is that there isn't a God in that sense, and the monarchs are just odd-bod people, and they're just the same as everyone else, and they get corrupted, and what you really get is autocracy, which is some monarch who basically says, I'm in charge and I'm going to kill you, and that's the way it is. So obviously you've got this big upsurgence in the Enlightenment of people going, hang on a minute, emperor without clothes, you say that God's, tells you, how do you know? Do you know what I mean? Skepticism. And then you've got this idea, well, a better idea is to get the people to decide. So you had the French Revolution, and then people were going, okay, the people will decide by voting representatives into a National Assembly, and they would decide what the deal is. So you've got this fantastic, vigorous sort of argument that a more just system is to let the people decide, right? And obviously this had a lot going for it because there's more people deciding, so you disperse power, as you might say. However, according to sort of modern psychology, is the problem with power with groups is they're subject to herding mechanisms, right? The problem with herding mechanisms goes a bit like this, is some people want to do X and then everyone else wants to do X because a few people are doing X, then everyone wants to do X, and then X becomes a little bit of a bad idea, right? Because X changes over time. And then no one is able to change X because everyone else is into X. Do you see what I mean? So you know where I'm going with this, is basically we've been raping nature for 200 years and able to get away with it because absolute power corrupts and nature hasn't got a vote, as you might say. So what we've got is we have this idea that everyone thinks it's okay to have a high consumer lifestyle and they vote for that, and the politicians say they're going to continue it because people will vote for it, and the people vote for it because the politicians will not change. So you get this like vicious cycle of exploitation of nature, even though you've got a democracy. Do you see what I mean? And no one can break out of it. So there's like this fatal sort of fault in democracy because they haven't really solved the problem of power. Do you see what I mean? They've half solved it, but you've still got the whole of the democratic body becoming corrupt. And then of course you throw into it gross economic inequality, and you've got the moneyed interest comes in that can buy the votes, and like working class people never get voted in because they haven't got the money and all this sort of thing. Do you see what I mean? So what deliberative democratic theorists have been talking about for the last 30 years is if you just go for the Enlightenment, early 19th century model of representative democracy, you're not necessarily going to solve the problem. Do you see what I mean? Because you're still going to be exploiting nature, and obviously in a global capitalist system, you're still going to have to, bow to international capital and what have you. So one of the big problems with everything I've told you is, even if you're successful and you go, right, we're going to have a reformed democracy, you're still going to end up in a mess. So everything that's been happening in the neoliberal period hasn't, even when people have been successful, it's gone quite pear-shaped quite quickly. So a classic example is Tahrir Square, where they didn't, they tried to have democracy for a while and it ended up with autocracy. But more interesting example is Ukraine. So Ukraine has had various revolutions, and everyone goes to the street and it's very heroic and, it's a little bit messy, but basically the government falls. And then what do? They reinstitute representational democracy. And so within 5 or 10 years, it's back to being super corrupt again and all the rest of it, okay? So the finishing thought I'd like to present to you is that if Extinction Rebellion is successful, or whether we're not successful and the French beat us to it or something, because it probably will, then what do you actually do once you actually get there? Do you see what I mean? So my final sort of contribution in all this is that sortition is basically the answer, because it combines elements of the divine right of kings, ironically, and representative democracy. So in case you don't know what sortition means, that's when you select a randomized selection of people from your population, okay, to become the power, the body that decides, okay? And why it's a little bit like the divine right of kings is because chance is quite similar to God, if you see what I mean. Because there's two similarities between God and chance, right? Is that humans can't influence God. Do you see what I mean? By definition. And humans can't influence chance by definition. Do you see what I mean? So the proposition here is that a sortition assembly is not corruptible. Now, nothing's absolutely not corruptible. Do you see what I mean? While a representational system is corruptible, because it's only a matter of time before inequality and big money decide they can't stand and they can, or, you know, with UKIP they're going to put $3 billion into it. Do you see what I mean? And so, like in the Western world, people are looking for something that doesn't go back to the bad old days. Do you see what I mean? So that's one reason why Extinction Rebellion is asking for a National Assembly. And I would propose to you, as my final comments, is that this is basically what we should be working towards, not going back to the representational model that's corrupted. So that's my finishing proposition. I think we won't talk about it. If anyone's got any questions about it, you can ask me a few, and then I'll make some final comments about the whole thing, and then we can go. Does everyone understand that?
Yeah, can I ask something?
Yeah.
Are there any good examples in the world at the moment of sortition that we can learn from?
Yeah, so there's been several, but one of the most successful is on abortion in Ireland, which has just happened in the last year or so. I don't know if people know this story, but basically, as you may know, Ireland has this massive debate about abortion. You've had the Catholic establishment for 70 years going no, 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 and everyone else, particularly women, going obviously yes. And it's going boom, 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 boom. So the politicians didn't want to have to deal with it, and you had all the corruption of the politicians with the Catholic Church and all the rest of it. So they said, okay, we're going to have a sortition assembly. So the sortition assembly got together. You know, you had bus drivers from, you know, Dublin and housewives from Cork. Do you see what I mean? A whole representative body, and they deliberated for 2 or 3 months. And you know, not surprisingly, when people deliberate, they come out with something that's compassionate and rational. When they're not interfered with big money. So they came out with this notion that, you know, abortion should be made legal. And it had two sort of major effects. First of all, because the sortition assembly is evidently legitimate democratically, because it's representative of all members of the community. Do you see? This is its massive attraction. You know, if there's 10% black people in the country, then there's going to be 10% on that assembly. So you completely sort out all that endless struggle for minorities to get proper representation. So it has that big legitimacy, and then that basically converts the population and say, well, they saw it, they're normal people like me, they say abortion is okay, so I'll vote for it. Do you see what I mean? So there's this massive vote for legalising abortion, and everyone's really surprised. But the really interesting thing about it, and I spoke to the filmmaker that followed it, who's made this really good film about it, and he said, he was like talking to politicians and people in the political sphere in Ireland. And basically the feeling is next time there's a major issue in Ireland, then the demand will be for a National Assembly. Do you see what I mean? So what we see here is the beginning of an evolution towards a different type of political resolution in progressive Western democracies. So you don't necessarily need this revolution, as it were. And if you look at the history of democracy, you see a similar sort of thing. You know, they saw it happening in Switzerland, for instance. So it was like there on the periphery, waiting to come in. And then you had the French Revolution, and everyone thought democracy was some quaint, you know, Athenian nonsense. And then suddenly, whoosh, within 30 years, everyone was going, well, obviously democracy makes sense. So the proposition is over the next 30 years, fingers crossed, you know, if we're not going to collapse into a total fascist mess, we're going to you know, we're going to be progressing onto this sort of situation.
How do people get selected? I mean, do people put themselves forward and say, look,
It's the same as jury service. So you take the whole citizenry, as it were, all the people in the country, and then you basically get a computer that selects them
so
by
it's
chance.
just random.
Yeah, which is why I'm sort of saying that it's a sort of act of God. Do you see what I mean? And if you look at, as I say, if you look at political theory, like the notion of God it's a political concept. Do you see what I mean? It's this notion of taking things out of human control. It's an old Christian idea that that knowledge corrupts, power corrupts. Do you see what I mean? So we shouldn't allow ourselves the arrogance, as it were, to think we can not be corrupted by power. So if we allow chance to decide who should decide, then it's going to be uncorruptible. Do you see what I mean? So it's a very profound idea, and it's something that everyone should be thinking about, in my opinion, because we've got, you know, we can't go back to what we've had before, and this potentially shows a way forward. Yeah.
I can see how that process would work really cleanly with sort of, for want of a better word, like single issue debates where it's a clear yes or no, we want abortion rights or we don't. How does it kind of play out when there are multiple issues at stake, or even sort of determining what's on the table, like what's being discussed? Does that make sense? Well,
the original sort of examples of sortition were ancient Athens. Everyone thinks ancient Athens was a democracy. It wasn't, because they sussed out that if they had voting, it would get corrupted. They were very clever, the Athenians. So they basically used the sortition assembly methodology. So that's like classical democracy was a sortition-based thing, and they did it in Florence in the Renaissance period as well. So it's actually a really ancient idea. So obviously this is a bit of a leap of faith because no one's done it for 400 years, but there's no particular reason why you can't have a sortition-based assembly in the same way as you can have a parliament. So they consider a whole range of issues. And obviously, you know, if you're a political, you know, deliberative democracy nerd, you can start messing around with the edges of it and how many people and for how long. But, you know, like democracy is basically a representational democracy, is variations on the theme, isn't there? But the central idea is that people vote. Do you see what I mean? So the central idea of sortition is you're selected by chance, and then, you know, there's pros and cons in terms of, is it a 2-year term? Does everyone have to decide together? You know, can people go and have jobs or not? You know, there's pros and cons to all those things. But the proposition is there's no intrinsic reason why a citizens' assembly selected by sortition can't run the country, basically. You know. Yeah.
How much percent do you need to have these assemblies of the entire population?
Sorry?
Because if you take a small number, then you wouldn't have a proper representation. So there must be like an ideal optimal number.
Yeah. Well, it's a sort of statistical matter, really. If you look at opinions and how they distribute through numbers, but the mathematics of it, and don't ask me to justify this, but the mathematics of it is as long as you get like 100 to 300 people, basically you've got a high statistical chance that you haven't got a skewed sample because of bad luck. Do you see what I mean? So, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't want to choose 2, would you? Like 10, because you could just shake the dice and find out you get 7 Tories or something. You know what I mean? It'd be a bit of a downer. But like, if you get up to 300 people, it's the same in social science in terms of data sets. You need to have a certain amount. It's somewhere around 100 to 300. But you know, if you want to have a national one, I quite like the idea of 1,000 people. You know, and then they can have sortition within the sortition, you know, to look at different issues or something. Yeah.
How would it work for something so complex as the ecological crisis, though? Because it's multiple levels of things that we need to do at all different policy levels. It's not just one policy. Everything impacts on everything in terms of the economic, all the different policies that impact on the ecology. So it's kind of like sorting out everything, isn't it? So how would you see it working for sorting out the ecological crisis?
Well, that's the $6 billion question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because basically we've left the ecological crisis too late for there not to be a complete transformation of society and economy if we're not going to go extinct. So that's just a matter of physics, if you see what I mean. So, you know, I suppose the historical analysis is revolutionary assemblies in the French and Russian Revolution, that basically transformed the structure of those societies through, through diktat, as you might say. But obviously they'll have a democratic legitimacy. But yeah, we're just looking at the depth of change, you know what I mean? So, if there was a sortition assembly in the UK, you can make a fairly good prediction they'll plonk on a 70%, tax on the top 10% because they're going to need the money to transform the economy. So, that's where we're going, in terms of structural predictions. There's people that are looking at how we're going to transition to an ecological society, and basically the richer toast whatever ideology you come from, because we're going to need the money. Do you see what I mean? So you're looking at a structural crisis of the economy anyway. Yeah. So there's no reason why a sortition assembly, it will be either reformist or revolutionary. It's the big point here is because it's deliberative, it will come up with the intersubjective truth a lot quicker. Do you see what I mean? Because it won't be interfered with I won't get elected again, or I won't get some money from my billionaire backer. Do you see what I mean? So my prediction is when sortition assemblies do deal with the climate crisis, they'll be coming out and saying, it's over and everything has to change, because it can work that out in 10 minutes.
Well, we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're talking about corrupting factors in kind of democratic institutions. What about corrupting factors that can come about kind of in the bigger world? So if you have a citizens' assembly, like the corrupting factor of the media, do you need to deal with that as well?
Yeah, it's a little bit chicken and eggy, isn't it? But the idea of a citizens' assembly, it's a bit like a jury. They have rules with the juries that you can't read the press, do you know what I mean? Or the press can't comment on an issue. So you could have a similar sort of situation as people in the citizens' assembly don't read what some billionaire press guy wants them to know. Do you see what I mean? So there's some variations in the theme. But I know it sounds sort of difficult for us because we've never actually been through a radical period, but I can assure you it does happen, and it is possible, and it's going to happen. Do you see what I mean? So it's not complicated, right? You pass a law that, the papers have to be democratically controlled and a billionaire can only own one of them. These aren't difficult things in terms of legislative construction. They're just difficult because we're controlled by people that don't want it to happen. So you can just go back to, Roosevelt and the New Deal period, if you want an example of how, you can socialise the economy quite quickly if everyone's in crisis. So I'm just going to finish off with my contradictory rhetorical flourish. But before I do that, I'm just going to say to you that there are 2 books as your homework. Blueprint for a Revolution, which is great fun. This is about these rock musicians that brought down Milosevic for using non-violent discipline. So if you want to, if you ever think that political revolution has to be boring and Maoist, then you should read this book. And This is an Uprising. That's another book which basically contextualizes the theory and practice of radical social change and gives some ideas about how to combine different sort of methodologies of bringing about change. And as I said at the beginning of the first session, there's embarrassingly little research on how to radically change society from a social scientific point of view. 99% of radical people read books on why things are bad. Well, reading books on why things are bad is probably the worst thing you can do in terms of changing them, because it doesn't give you any idea about what to do. Okay? If you want to know about what to do, you have to read these books, and preferably something about sales theory and management theory, which probably will wind you up. But those guys know how to control the world, so you want to look at that. So that's that. And there's this network called Radical Think Tank. So if all of you are super nerdy and want to spend the next 4 years working out how we're going to bring down the British government in so much as it doesn't happen in April, then if you see us, we might have a little meeting and a network basically for people that are interested in doing some research on this sort of thing. So my final sort of contradictory rhetorical flourish is as follows. So one of the things that I've been trying to communicate over the last 2 sessions is that if you want to change the world, as it were, you have to look about what's effective, right? So that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years. The key sort of mode of operation is, does it work? Do you see what I mean? And obviously that's got a lot going for it, as hopefully you've seen, right? You've got to be ruthlessly going into the field and say, that didn't work, you know, A to B march, fantastic, everyone's really happy, but fuck all happens. Do you see what I mean? While, you know, spray chalking the building, going to prison, it's a bit tricky, but it works. Do you see what? That's the general proposition. But I want to sort of throw a little thing into here, which is this, the paradoxical thing is there's lots of research, well, not lots of research, but there is research that shows or indicates that people that are most obsessed with effectiveness aren't actually that effective. So I just contradict the last 6 hours or whatever it is. And the logic goes like this, is that if you always looking about what's effective, then you'll come to the conclusion that it's not actually rational to do very much because it looks so impossible to make change happen. Do you see what I mean? So this is like the utilitarian orientation. I shouldn't act unless I'm going to get a return. Do you see what I mean? And so there's a big Achilles heel of that, which is what I call like the death spiral of pragmatism, which is, you know, you see this in the Green Party, the whole of the political field. We can't talk about climate change because we'll lose votes, you know, because voters aren't interested, because the politicians aren't interested, because we're not interested, because and it just goes around in a circle. Do you see what I mean? So this is like the big problem with the utilitarian orientation. So what social research shows is that people that actually change the world tend to have a virtue ethics orientation. The virtue ethics orientation goes like this. You know, the bad guys are bad, and I'm going to go into battle with them because of duty, honour, tradition, God, right? Those are the main motivating factors historically in why people go into battle. Do you see what I mean? And I mean violent or non-violent. And so ironically, the first guys over the top, as it were, your critical mass guys, the guys that actually get it on the go, are primarily virtue ethics orientated or religiously orientated. So there's this Oxfam guy who's saying, like, you know, the guys in the NGO in the global north, you know, they're educated, you know, they're middle class, they're rational, they're secular, they like to think about things. Do you see what I mean? While the guys in the global south that go out, you know, and, you know, get tortured and all the rest of it, they're uneducated, in inverted commas. They tend to be religious, you know, they tend to be following a virtue ethics orientation. Do you see what I mean? So it's more like, I'm going to go out into Tahrir Square or something because of who I am. So the final thought about all this, and God knows how you're going to reconcile them, but I have problems with the notion of, I don't think contradiction is the worst thing in the world. But like, I would suggest you sort of juggle those in your brain, and never doubt, however, I know it's a cliche, but never doubt that 10 people in this room could actually save the world. You can, and you can do it by having this virtue ethics orientation and also keeping your brain on all this stuff at the same time. So good luck. Good luck, everyone.